Hello, and welcome to the Be Purely Balanced podcast. I'm Dr. Crystal Couture, and today I'm here with Emily Willmer. Emily has been fascinated with crystals for as much of her life as she can remember. She has memories from when she was young and going into stone shops, picking out different stones, and spending a lot of time outside collecting buckets full of rocks, some of which still lie around her house today. She started exploring the metaphysical properties of crystals when she was in high school after being introduced to meditation and New Age practices by Michele Lowry. After graduating from college, the universe led her to a plan that she used to create what became her true purpose. She entered into a period of self-discovery where finally it occurred to her that her calling was crystals. She signed up for the Hibiscus Moon Crystal Academy Certified Crystal Healer course and graduated in August of 2016. She created Earth Speaks Crystal Healing with the intention of bringing the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual healing of crystals to anyone who needs or wants it. Welcome, Emily.
Hi.
It's a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Oh, yes. It's so wonderful to be here.
So why don't we first talk about your journey into crystal healing and how you've always been attracted to stones.
Yeah, as you said in my bio, when I was little, I just have memories of going into them and going to little turntables that all the crystals were in. I think it was the mustard seed, actually, my mom told me. That still exists today. And I would just pick stones. I have a vivid memory of a sapphire that I wish I still had because it was like a perfect sphere. And somewhere along the way, I think I got out of it probably as I grew up and went to school and it was like less in my life. And then when I met Michele through my horse in high school, it just kind of all came back. And I was, again, they were always there, but I was just got reintroduced almost. And it was lovely. And I just read books and I read books and I got so interested in them again. And started amassing my great collection that I now have. And used them on myself. And I would help people when they asked me questions. And when I went to school for biology, they all went with me too. And then, like you said, the universe, I was going to be a chiropractor, but then when I actually went out to the school, there was a big no. Like I had the strangest experience out there where it's really hard to describe because it's not necessarily a logical thing. Like if somebody would just be like, why didn't you just push through it? But I got out there and I literally could not walk around. Like I couldn't leave the hotel and I would just get these big gut-wrenching feelings of fear and like no, and that weren't rational. Like it was completely separate from my logical mind, which was the strangest experience for me because in going to school for biology, I kind of lost balance between my analytical and my more spiritual side. And so my logical brain kind of was going a little bit nuts. Like, what's going on? Like, this doesn't make any sense. But eventually I realized that I couldn't stay out there and I came home. And that's when, with the help of my fabulous support system up here, I really turned to my crystals to help me work through that. And then went, I could do this. Like, this is something I could actually do. I love this. And they're so helpful and they help me heal and they help me stay grounded in my everyday life. There's absolutely no reason why this can't be something I do. I've wanted to do it. I do it all the time. Why not? Right? So I looked for the course just to give myself a groundwork to work from, because at the time I didn't feel like I was good enough to just start doing it on my own. So my logical brain was like, you need to do a course that makes it official. And so I did. And I've just been doing, and it gave me the framework I needed to really get the confidence in doing it and knowing kind of what a session would look like and all the things. And since then, I've just been working through it and helping people with all the crystals and stuff.
So you've always had this tendency toward healing, wanting to go into school for chiropractic, right? And
yeah.
Particularly equine chiropractic.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, so you've had this tendency toward healing, toward crystals, and it's cool to see the evolutionary process of how, your career kind of started off one way and you've sort of shifted in another direction, and so early in your life. So many people go through college and they do the pushing, and then years later they have that transformation. So how cool is it that you were brave enough to step in right now to that soul purpose?
Oh yeah, and it was not easy. Like, I resisted the whole way. Like, I would have completely gone through with being a chiropractor. I'd say I got a 2x4 to the head by the universe, because basically I had been ignoring all the small signs that were saying, no, don't do it. No, don't do it. Like, there were times, like, even when I was still an undergrad and I would think about going out to chiropractic school, and I would get that clenching in my stomach, that little no, and I would be like, oh, I'm just nervous, or oh, it'll work out, or whatever. And then finally it went, you know what, whack, like, stop, like, this is not the right direction. And it was the strangest experience of my life, but at the same time, I'm glad it happened too, because I didn't get stuck doing something that I didn't want to do.
Totally. Yeah. So let's talk now about really the personal transformation that's happened for you through this process. So obviously, you had to face your resistance. You had to face really being vulnerable in order to transition. So what was that like? And, how did the crystals support you through that process?
Yeah. Funnily enough, the real healing only has happened for me at the beginning of this year. And this happened, the whole going out to school happened 2 years ago, back in the fall of 2015. And it has really taken, in this year, starting at the beginning of this year, I don't know why, is really when I stepped into doing the work that's helped push me past what I've been holding on to from that. So I really dealt with forgiving myself. First, it was forgiving myself for ignoring the signs. Like, I was holding on to, like, I would beat myself about not realizing what was happening before it actually happened, because that's just part of my natural self. I blame myself, and I have a lot of, like, I put a lot of blame on myself versus where there's no blame at all, really. There's no blame for it. It just happened, and there's no blame from the universe. It's just like, I just needed to stop you. So I did. So I did a lot back in February with that. I wrote about it too, which had been very helpful for me, because expressing it in writing for me has always been very helpful in organizing my thought processes and getting everything out. Mm-hmm. And that was the first time I ever worked with a grid of crystals on myself for an extended period of time, and really tapped into it and got through it. And it was strange, because it's hard for me to work on myself sometimes. You might experience that too. That it's easy for me to work on other people, but it's not as easy for me to tap into what I need to do for myself. So that was the first one that I did, major thing that I did. And then recently it's been guilt, like dealing with, like, not being able to, like, I hurt myself recently. And so to the point where I wasn't going to be able to do the work that I thought that I needed to do. And so I felt really guilty because I couldn't do what people expected me to do. Mm. And I felt guilty that people needed to help me. And so I really decided, and I've come a long way, because after the initial shock wore off, I turned and went, okay, so why did it happen? And what crystals do I need to help me work through it? So I really was able to start looking at crystals and helping them. The big thing's been communication for me right now. That's always been my problem. So this is actually very helpful for me, coming out and talking about things. So I'm working with that and actually expressing my gratitude. So the whole thing was about shifting from a place of feeling guilty about something to being grateful that I have the help that I have, and that I have the support system that I have, and being grateful to myself for giving myself the time I need to heal. And so that's really where I am now, and moving forward, and just sharing my gratitude with everybody for anything they help me with, or anything in general, really. And
wow,
it's been interesting past couple months with that. So,
Emily, it's amazing to see you in such a vulnerable and present state. I love that. And I love the openness of it. So it seems like the crystals have done this work and helped you to do this work around this concept of awareness, like being able to tune in and say, I'm going through this process and working with my own guilt. I'm going through this process and working with these various emotions that are often even hard to name, is so big. And that personal healing journey is so important. And, I commend you 100% for the effort that you're putting in the awareness, but I'd love to tune into that awareness and tune into how crystals really help us bring our awareness up, level up, so to speak.
Yeah. So basically, the basic way crystals work is that they have a really stable chemical structure. So they're very stable energetically. Not a lot whacks them out of alignment. They vibrate at a frequency and they stay there because of the crystal structure. Whereas because we're made up of so many different parts, like all the different organ systems, all the different cell types, all the different everything, we get whacked out of alignment really, really easily because all those things don't necessarily have the same vibrations. So the way crystals work is that they act as oscillators, and our energies align with theirs because theirs is so stable and it stays stable. So that's how they help stabilize our energy and bring them back into alignment and reduce the stress and the physical ailments and the emotional issues. All those low vibration or awkward vibration things, they fall into resonance with and make it and bring to their level essentially and bring us back to a healthy state, which is what's lovely about them. And they can do that through color, size, shape, and then their chemical composition too plays a part in that. It's very sciencey, actually. It's a very sciencey thing when you think about it that way, but they're lovely.
So now I'm curious. So different colors of crystals, different types of crystals, they have these colors based upon their chemical composition, right? And these are naturally occurring. Predominantly, let's talk about naturally occurring. They're naturally occurring compounds that bring about these brilliant colors.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So like a lot of stones that you see that are green or blue, they tend to have copper in them. Like, so malachite, for example, is the one that comes to mind for me. Its predominant element is copper, which is why it's green. So if you think of the Statue of Liberty, how it's not corroded, I don't know, or tarnished over the years, it's turned green, or when copper gets old, it turns green. It's kind of that way. Same thing, azurite is another one. It's actually blue, but if you leave it alone for too long, it can fade and turn green as well. What's another example of one that I can think of? Greens and blues are the ones that pop out to me most color-wise, because you would never think that those colors would come out of anything.
Right.
The reds and stuff, if you think about reds, iron, right? So rust and stuff. And I haven't done too much work looking into exactly what colors make what, but those are the ones that come to mind as the most obvious ones. And those in color, of course, just the energy of color does work on us. Anything color wise can tune in and help us with our vibrations and whatever, because of the light vibration, just the light frequency that those colors bounce off. So they work in that way, and then their own vibration on top of that is more beneficial. That they just layer on a whole bunch of different stuff, which is lovely, because somebody can be attracted because of color, or they can be attracted because the vibration is what they need, which is lovely.
So we talk about the vibration. Is there a way that the vibration is measured?
Yeah. I've got to think back to my course days. I'm sure, like, I know they have what's called a dominating oscillatory rate, or dominant oscillating rate, which is just the rate at which they vibrate. So everything innately has a vibration. So they just kind of sit there, and based on their structure and what's in their composition, we have vibrations, they have vibrations. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure how they exactly measure that, because it's such a small vibration. I'm not sure if I'm sure there's some sort of technology out there that can measure it. And I know that, for example, quartz is used in watches and stuff to help measure time, because when you squeeze a quartz or you apply mechanical pressure to it, it actually creates an electrical signal. So that's how quartz is used in watches. That's how they measure time and how they store the energy and use quartz in watches. And I know rubies are used in lasers. So, I mean, the structure and the vibrations of them are used in our technology that we're using probably even right now, like computers, silicon chips, all the things. But as far as what exactly measures it, I can't think of what it actually is.
That's okay. It's cool that there's so much science to back it up, you know. And I think I see crystals all over the place. I'm very attracted to crystals myself, but I'm starting to see them in places that are unexpected. You know, and it seems like they're more accessible, even taking a walk through Home Goods or TJ.
Oh yeah.
You're finding crystals now, right?
Yeah. Home Goods is like one of those places that has become a hub for them.
Yeah, it's cool. So it makes them really accessible. And even if people are just finding the visual appeal as something that they want to bring into their home, it's bringing in that vibration. It's bringing in that frequency as well.
Yeah. And amethyst is really popular in Home Goods. Amethyst and selenite, which is helpful because both of those stones are really protective and really purifying. So even there are some big pieces there too. I actually saw big geodes there once, a pair of big cathedral things, which I was really surprised to see. I was like, oh my gosh, like in a Home Goods, this is not where I thought I would see this sort of thing. But they're really great about, it makes me happy that people are bringing that sort of energy into their house, even if they don't necessarily know what it is or doing it for that purpose, because even just thinking something's pretty is helping you. And they work. That's the thing about crystals, is you don't have to be actively pick them up and carry them around or sit with them for them to do their job. They're always working. And they're always happy to.
That's so cool. I love that. It speaks to this idea of, you know, humans finding that soul purpose, finding that alignment, you know, because if we could get into that place, then we're always happy to do our work too. And our structure becomes more stable.
Yeah.
So it seems like there are some metaphorical lessons for us to perhaps pick up from the crystals themselves.
Oh yes. Like, 'cause for me, they're like little people almost. They're not human because we are uniquely ourselves, but they exist in this state. And that's something that's actually, I just picked up a book recently that was talking about how crystals are actually alive. They're just on a different geological time. They're on geological time, not human time. So basically they reproduce and they grow and they do all the things that are required to be alive, except they do it over hundreds of thousands of years versus over decades or centuries, right? So it's harder to see. Like a crystal, like a quartz crystal could break off or shatter, and a piece could fall somewhere in the exact perfect growing conditions, and that little piece will grow into another crystal. So it was just really interesting when I read that. I was like, wow, they really could kind of, being a biology major and graduating, I was like, wow, they can kind of be considered alive if you think about it in that way. And I would love to do more. Like, my science brain gets going wild when I start thinking about things like, I'm like, oh, I want to test that. I want to, like, I still have that piece of me that wants to, like, do all the stuff with, like, test certain, it's a dream of mine to be able to somehow to test how crystals affect somebody. There's not a lot of real science-y studies out there that test that sort of thing. But I would love, in my brain, would love to have that happen someday, even though I recognize that it's not necessarily biology, it's actually physics. So I would have to do more schooling to really understand the physics behind the energy that's working there. But it's a fascinating thing for me in my brain. It just goes wild when I think about it.
So I've got a science one for you.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know if there are studies, because crystals have this really stable structure and pattern, right, which allows them to elicit a stable vibration and pattern of frequency. So, in the presence of crystals, do we know what happens with the human brainwaves? Like, have they done studies to see if the brainwaves are like dropping into that alpha state, the more meditative state of being?
Off the top of my head, I don't know if there's been a study that's specifically focused on that, but just knowing the way crystals work, I can imagine that happens somehow. When somebody really gets, if I had the way to test this, I would do it while I was doing a session on somebody just to see, because when I do work on myself and I really get in there and I'm working on myself, I fall into that meditative state where I'm aware of everything around me, but at the same time I feel like I'm sleeping. So just feeling that, I can kind of make the assumption that we fall into that. And I fall asleep with crystals every night anyway, so they certainly help me fall asleep too. So I can imagine on some level that they affect that energetic piece of ourselves.
Yeah, that frequency. Yeah, well, there you go. There's another study for you.
See? Isn't it a fascinating thing? Like, if I had the access to all the technology and information I needed, I would be all set.
Yeah, definitely. So why don't we talk a little bit about what crystals might be great crystals for people to start with, for people to play with, get their hands on if they haven't played with crystals before.
Yeah, one of the biggest things, since this is I don't want to say problem, but one of the most common issues we have in today's society is grounding. So you definitely want to have at least one grounding crystal. My go-to for that is black tourmaline. It's just, for me, it's super down to earth. It's basically, it does exactly what you need it to do. And if you just place that between your feet and just sit there and kind of breathe for a while, it'll help you reattach yourself to the earth. Another good one for grounding would be smoky quartz, which is a variety of quartz that's black to dark brown in color. Sometimes it can be very clear, but the darker it is, the better for as far as the grounding piece. Another one that people probably have heard about as far as crystals are concerned, just being popular, is hematite. Hematite will also do the same thing. It's the very shiny ones that sometimes are magnetic, but they're not naturally magnetic, so that's the thing to be careful of. The pieces of hematite that you can stick to your fridge have actually been changed to be magnetic, because naturally it's not. But and then rose quartz, which I'm sure almost everybody has seen at some point in their life, because it's so popular as far as, and that's the variety, that's the pink quartz. So it can be bright pink, it can be in soft pink, but that's a good stone to have around for relaxation and heart work and love, and just getting in relaxation essentially is great for that one. And then quartz is going to be your go-to for the most part, the quartz family. So citrine, which is yellow quartz. So that's your confidence, your digestive issues, and your willpower, basically. That sits with your solar plexus and helps you be more energetic. And then amethyst, which we've talked briefly about, which is purple quartz. And that's your crown, that's your third eye, that's your spiritual work, your more spiritual work. If you're looking for that, it helps with meditation, helps with sleep, insomnia, headaches, and it's also good for addictions. That's the other thing amethyst is really helpful with, is helping you deal with addictions, whether that be alcohol or smoking or anything. It helps with you release that, which is good. And then my other personal favorite is, I totally just blanked on the name, lepidolite, which is a purple form of mica. So it's another really relaxing stone that actually has lithium in it. Lithium is one of the main elements. So that's, if you're looking at from the chemical standpoint, lithium is used as a treatment for a lot of mental illnesses or mood disorders. And that's what the stone does. It helps balance anxiety and promote relaxation and stuff. So I always think it's a really interesting thing to see. that what we use, that something we use as a treatment can be found in a stone that does the same thing, which is lovely.
Definitely. So I have to share this story. Emily and I were chatting before we pressed record on this podcast. And, you know, I just got in the mail a few new crystals. And they all happened to be stones that then Emily said, "Oh, I love that one. Oh, I love that one." And the funny thing is she brings up lepidolite now. And of course, that is the one stone I didn't tell you that came in the mail.
Yay! I always say get that one because it does basically everything that you could possibly need, as far as I've used it for digestive issues too, because I think the relaxation property of it helps to relax like my digestive system when my stomach is very unhappy with me. But I just love it. I sleep with it every night, and it's one of my favorite ones.
I love it. I love the synchronicity when that happens in a podcast, which is every time. It's just something is so synchronous. So what would a session be like, Emily, if somebody came to you for a healing session? What is that like? How do healing sessions work? You know, how do you choose the crystals, and how do you apply them and work with the energy?
Yeah. Everything I do is intuitive. So I have these bead cases that are full of all mostly tumbled crystals, and those travel with me if I'm traveling to somebody's house. And then if I'm at my own place, there's a plethora of other things lying around because I have far too many crystals to take everything with me. But I'll open all those up and just kind of look at them and pull out which ones catch my attention or call to me. Or if you come into the session with a specific topic or issue that you want to address, I won't necessarily just mentally pull them, but I will keep that in mind when I'm looking at the cases to see what pops out and see if I can because what I've learned is that so we were talking about how citrine is used for digestive issues earlier, and I've learned that what's written in a book is true about 85% of the time for somebody as far as the crystal properties. So if, say, I chose citrine came out, but then I intuitively guess where on the body that it wants to be put. So I work with the chakras, the 7 energy systems, and I balance those with the help of the crystals. But we talked about how citrine normally, when you look it up and you look up its properties, is associated with solar plexus. But I will stay in tune and put it where it wants to be put. So say it might want to be put on the 3rd eye, for example. And then once I've placed all the stones on the body, on the energy centers, so that they can physically do their own work on the energy center, I tap into the stones and see what they say regarding messages about what's going on there, and things that the person can do to help move through that or rebalance that particular energy center. And I've had sessions, I worked on somebody once where instead of working vertically through the chakras, I did it in a spiral, which was the weirdest thing ever. But I really focus on trying to be guided by what needs to be done and what, not necessarily what I think logically has to be done.
I think that's a great attribute of a healer. You know, to be able to adjust to the way that the body is guiding you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm curious now, talking about the sessions, talking about what it's like to be, you know, really, really present during a session, and how do you feel the energy sort of shift and transform and evolve during the session? What is that like?
For me, I just have to, I always have to make sure I've eaten something. Because if I don't, and I've learned this over the years and over the past couple of years doing it, that I have to make sure that I'm letting the energy travel through me and not that I'm using my own. Because there's been a couple of times where I think I've been using my own and I get tired and I get a little wobbly. And that's mostly when the session's pretty intense, like when there's a lot going on and I'm writing a lot and there's a lot of information coming through, I can feel it as drain in myself.
Mm-hmm.
But there, like I was talking about the one where I did the spiral, I was like, this is the weirdest thing. Like, I had been thinking, and the weird part for me was that I had been thinking about working with the chakras in a spiral for a long time before I actually did that session.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got there and was like, oh, like, this is like, she kind of had a disconnect in energy from like the earth to the rest of her body. So I kind of akin it to, I needed to jumpstart the energetic system. Yeah. And I had just recently had issues with my car, which was the other weird thing, that my car needed to be frequently jumped because the battery was not working. So I basically akin it to, I had to jumpstart the energy system. So I had to, instead of working vertically from root chakra up to the crown, I actually had to start at the crown and work in a spiral, a counterclockwise spiral. So from going from the crown down to the root, up to the third eye, to the sacral, to the throat, to the solar plexus, to the heart, that way, because her crown was open, but everything below her solar plexus wasn't. So I couldn't get the energy from that direction. I couldn't get it to go up. So I had to kind of go down and around. It was a really weird experience, but I'm like, I'm just gonna go with it. And that one was an intense one, and cool. And I worked after, I'm like, why did I do it that way? Why does it work that way? And I was like, well, energy enters our bodies from the earth, but it also comes down from the top. So when I couldn't get it up from the earth, I had to work in the opposite direction. And I'm like, this is so weird. Like, and then my brain started going all sciencey again, and I started thinking about light photons and how light's released when it goes to, my brain kind of went into overdrive, and I have it all written down somewhere, but I haven't done a lot of research with it yet. But that was probably one of the most interesting and intense ones for me, was because it was so different.
Yeah, this idea, two things come to mind. This idea, as above, so below. Mm-hmm. And also, that we as humans are just a vessel to connect heaven and earth. Mm-hmm. So those two concepts sort of come up for me as something that the crystals are helping us to link, So I'm curious, because you're so well educated and well read. Do you have a favorite book that would be a good resource for any of our listeners today?
Yeah, perhaps my favorite one as far as looking up the properties of crystals is the first one that I got was The Crystal Healer by Philip Permut. And that was, it's separated by color. So if you don't know what it is, you can go to the color section and just flip through until you find the one that looks like it. But at the same time, if you know what it is, you can go to that color and find it. Another one, if you're really getting into it, and really want to know a lot, like it carries, I've gotten really enlightened now, so my mouth is starting to not communicate with me as well as it did in the beginning. But the other one is called The Book of Stones, and it's more like, if you think of a reference book, like it's a reference book. It's probably about 1.5 inches thick and like 12 by 8 in size. And it's just got there's so much information in there. So many of the rarer crystals to find, because and the high vibrational crystals, and it gives you a ton of information about them and their color and their chakra association, and also about their chemical properties. So their hardness, whether or not you can put them in water and expect them to survive, and what they're made up of. So this book gives you their chemical composition. So it's like silicon dioxide, which is quartz, and it would tell you what the chemical composition of lepidolite is, which it has lithium in it, but I don't know the exact full name as far as chemical compound is concerned. But if you were going to look up crystals based on that, this book gives you that information as well, which is really helpful.
That's so cool. So I know you're eager to talk about some of the oddball, unique crystals that you love so much. So why don't you go through and give us 5 of your favorite super unique crystals?
Yes. Okay. So first one I think we were talking about earlier too is bumblebee jasper. Mm-hmm. That was another one that you just got in the mail, and it's looks like a bumblebee essentially. It's bright yellow and black stripes, and it's just a really high vibrational crystal. And I'm not sure as far as, I mean, it's rare. I don't see it very often in the stores I go to, but you can find it online fairly easily. But generally a crystal's rarity is shown in its price, right? So the more expensive it is, the harder it is to find naturally in the earth. I'm sure there's a great stock somewhere, but someday I'll find it. The other one is Larimar, which is actually, I think, described as the dolphin stone. So if you want to grab a piece of that one, that you would probably really like that one too. It's this light blue, kind of looks like the sky essentially. It's really light sky blue with white patterns running through it. And it's only found in one mine in the Dominican Republic. So it's really, really, really rare right now because that's the only place you can find it. And that's just got the most calming, soothing energy that there is. So if you're really looking to be just like sitting by the ocean on a tropical beach, essentially, it looks like that and it feels like that.
So Emily, I got to pause you before you get into your next 3 unique crystals, because Larimar is, of course, dolphin stone, and many of you know by now that I work with dolphins. Of course, you made the reference just now. But Larimar is my engagement stone.
Oh my goodness, that's lovely. I didn't even know that. Fantastic.
The synchronicity.
Look at all those little synchronicities that are happening. Haha.
Okay, so you've got 3 more crystals for us, Emily.
Yes. Off the top of my head, the one that that's coming to mind as far as it wanting to be shared is azurite. And I don't actually have a piece of this, and I don't know much about it, but it came to mind, so I'm going to talk about it. And it's found in clear quartz. It's actually an inclusion, and it's this, again, this bright blue, kind of teal colored. And just not knowing exactly what it's used for, because I don't have one, so I don't use it very often. But the feeling I get from it is another one of those ones that's really high vibrational, and because it's blue, I'm immediately brought to communication. So I'm assuming, for me, communication is what I'm working on right now. So that must be why it came to mind for me. But whatever it makes you think of, that's what it will do for you. That's what I love about crystals, is they're so versatile, and that what it does for me is not what it does for somebody else. But azurite, I have never seen a piece in person. I've only seen pictures of it, and in the books that I have, or in the crystal cards that I have. That's the other thing I use when I don't have the actual crystal, is I have this deck of cards that has really high quality pictures of these high vibrational crystals. And I'll use those if I want to tap into the energy of that. And that was azurite. And yes, I just get this lovely kind of hugging feeling from that one. The other one that I like, and I don't know if it's rare, but it's another high vibrational one, is called sedonalite. And it's essentially just the Sedona red rocks. So the red rocks that come from the Sedona area, because Sedona is such a high vibrational place, especially for the United States. There's like 8 vortexes or something. There's a lot going on energetically there. These stones are just, they basically exude that. I think they've got a high quartz content, which is another reason why they hold that energy and vibrate that energy. And I picked up a few pieces when I went out there a couple years ago. I can't tell time anymore apparently, and they just, whenever I hold them, I just am brought back to the feeling I had when I was out there, which was this sense of a busy quiet, if that makes sense. So it was quieter out there, but there was a lot more going on at the same time. And I think it was that energetic energy, that not a physical busyness, but an energetic busyness, which is fantastic. So if you can get a hold of a piece of that, and that will shot put you into the higher realms of vibrational energy. I'm down to one more now, I think. And so many options. I guess the one that I'm looking at right now that I can see across the room is what I call, or what I think is called, a Brandberg amethyst. So it comes from a very specific region in Africa. And this particular piece I got at the Freiburg Fair, and it's actually a smoky quartz and an amethyst at the same time. So you can't see the amethyst unless you shine the light through it. It actually has this pillar of purple right up the center of the quartz point, but around it, it's actually the dark smoky quartz color.
Wow.
And it's also very fractured. So it's got a lot of indents and a lot of pieces like cut out of it, kind of like it was not broken, but pieces broke out of it. And it's got some mica inclusions in it as well. But the thing that makes this one really special for me is it actually has 5 water bubbles in it. So bubbles of water got trapped inside the crystal as it was forming. Whoa. And this one has 5. So they're called anhydrous because the water's included. And those crystals typically tend to be very high vibrational because they're holding a piece of something from the past, and those water bubbles help you bring out more as far as vibrational energy or things you're holding on to, or past life stuff is what comes to mind. And it's just a really, really interesting looking stone that I worked with the other day. It doesn't come out very often, but it came out the other day. So I should explore that more, I think. But I'm fascinated by quartz too, just in general, quartz that have different formations, because quartz can be unique in itself. Even if it's just a clear quartz, it can have a unique shape or a unique energy or color or anything. So I think that's 5 of them. Did I get 5?
Yeah, that's amazing. I love the 5 you chose. I love the uniqueness. Learning from you, Emily, has been so much fun today. You're just an abundance of wisdom and energy, and it's amazing because the conversation, you alluded to this earlier, the vibration raises in the conversation, and that's what I love, bringing in this energy just by thinking about the crystals is raising the vibration. So I'm excited for our listeners to have this opportunity to raise the vibration as well.
Yeah.
So Emily, our listeners can find you at earthspeakscrystalhealing.wordpress.com, which we will put it into the show notes. So it's easy for people to click that link because it's a little bit of a long one.
Yes, it is a long one.
And then you're also with us on Facebook and Instagram. So that's very exciting. And you do local sessions in New Hampshire?
Yes.
And then do you do any other kind of distance sessions, or do you mostly work with local people?
I have started experimenting with doing remote sessions. I did one on a friend that I have back in Ohio, which is where I went to school, and she loved it. So I'm starting to experiment with that more. And I am offering now like remote, what I call crystal messages sessions or crystal guidance sessions, where I choose 4 stones based on a topic or a question you have, and I kind of tune into them and see what they have to say about that, or see what messages they offer as far as healing and work to do around the question or topic that you give me.
Great. So is there anything that you would like to share intuitively with our listeners today before we close?
Mostly just to follow your own guidance as far as crystals are concerned, because they work best when you allow them to talk to you the way that you receive your information. So for me, everything comes through very much as just an innate knowing, because I'm what's called like a clairsentient. So my intuitive knowledge comes to me as far as I just know it, versus it being a vision or something other outside of myself, which can make it hard because sometimes I don't know if it's my own brain or actual guidance I'm getting, but just let them speak to you in the way they speak to you, because they are talking. It's just, and if you don't hear anything, don't think that it's not working, because they're always doing their work. So just continue to be still and breathe with them, and the more you work with them, the easier it gets. So that's the biggest thing.
That's amazing, Emily. I think it's so true. It's just a testament to you being in this energy and staying in this crystal energy and honoring what comes through, and the way that you share is beautiful. So thank you so much for being with us today.
No problem. It was wonderful.